Rodriguez with Hispanic Speak Out here from the White House in Washington, D.C. And with me I have today Mr. Danny Ramos, President of Hispanic Achievers. So Danny, tell us, why are we here at the White House?
We're launching a new program as a byproduct of Hispanic Speak Out TV. What we're doing is we're creating role model programs. In other words, what we're doing is we're creating shows, 30 minutes long, dedicated to role models, outstanding Hispanics in government, industry, and culture, in the arts. And these are going to be role model interviews or biographies of the history of these people. And it's going to be video streamed throughout the country in all the high schools and middle schools throughout the nation.
Thank you, Danny. And this will be shown to students across the nation so that they can learn about Hispanic achievers, role models.
It's going to be video streamed in order to show Hispanic kids who are in the inner cities that there are kids who were originally in the inner cities and made it to places like the White House. In a little while, we'll be interviewing the White House Counsel for the President of the United States, Alberto Gonzalez. And as you know, Alberto Gonzalez came from very humble beginnings. His parents were immigrants. He came from economically deprived households. They worked very hard, and he made it to the White House, and he's now the president's lawyer. And what we want to do is illustrate to all Hispanic kids throughout the nation that with hard work, diligent effort, and towards a good education, that they can make it to the top.
Great, great.
And the function of these videos is to show them that visually.
Thank you, Danny. Well, let's take you on to our interview with Alberto Gonzalez, Counsel to the President of the United States. Judge Gonzalez, how did you become White House Counsel?
I became counsel because when the day after the election, then Governor Bush called me in my home. It was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I presume it was late in the afternoon because he was up late the night before as they were awaiting the tally in Florida. And he called to congratulate me about winning my election. I'd been on the ballot as well for a 6-year term in the Texas Supreme Court, so he called to congratulate me on my victory, and also to ask me whether or not I'd be interested in coming to work for him in Washington if he were to prevail in the election. We had a very good conversation. I asked him about what he would expect of me as his lawyer, whether or not we would still have the same kind of relationship as lawyer and client that we had when I was his lawyer when he was governor. I also remember that during that conversation he said that, well, this will all be over in a few days, and then the election will be over in a few days and we can move on. So that's how I found out that he wanted me to be his lawyer.
You talked about being his counsel as governor. With a year as governor, as his counsel as president, what would you say are the distinct differences between counsel as the governor and now as the president? Well,
a lot of the issues are the same we have to deal with. Providing ethics advice, reviewing legislation, providing advice as to whether or not legislation is constitutional or otherwise infringes upon the power of the executive branch, serving as the lawyer for the agency, either as governor or as president. The responsibilities are really the same, but this is by far the most challenging thing I've ever done. I mean, because the media pressure is so intense. Political opponents look at everything that we do and everything that we say, and they scrutinize everything. And so there is a lot at stake here. The issues that we have to confront are the most complex possible, and they have tremendous domestic and international consequences. So a lot rides on the advice that we give to the President of the United States.
Now, I understand you were the second of 8 children growing up. Tell us a little bit about your family history.
My parents were both born in Texas. I'm a Texan. I'm very, very proud of that. My mother was born in San Antonio, and my father was born in Kennedy, Texas. They come from very, very poor families. They were migrant workers as young children. My mother, had a 6th grade education. My father had a 2nd grade education. They both had to quit school to work to help provide for their families, and they met as migrant workers, as I said, and eventually my dad became a construction worker in Houston, and when the children started coming, they had to settle down in Houston, and my mother stayed at home working very hard, helping to raise 8 children, and we grew up in the north side of Houston.
And growing up with a big family, was predominantly in Spanish or in English? How did that work out?
It was predominantly in English, quite frankly. I think my parents had a fear that if we didn't learn how to communicate and read in English, that would be a problem for us in terms of limiting our future. And so they spoke to us in English. it was very, very important. Our education was very important to them. Now, they spoke to each other in Spanish, but they spoke to us primarily in English because for them it meant freedom in this country.
Now, proud to be a Texan, the first thing that came to mind is a true Texan continues to wear his boots. Are you still wearing your boots at the White House?
Absolutely.
those are key things. We want to make sure the core values still there.
Absolutely. And
let me ask you.
I look forward to getting back to Texas.
It does. About Rice University.
Right.
Tell us about Rice University, working the concession stand, the dream that you had. Where were you? What were you feeling at that time?
When I was 12, I got a job selling soft drinks at Rice University football games. And I didn't work at a concession stand. I would carry a tray of Cokes and Sprites up and down the stands. And always at the end of the game, I'd always climb up to the top of the stadium. And Rice, if you've ever been to Houston, it's got 4,000 students, but they have a stadium that holds 75,000 people. And I'd climb up to the top of the stands and I'd watch the students stroll leisurely back to the campus. And Rice has a beautiful tree-lined campus. And I used to dream about how incredible it would be to go to school there. And so I had this dream of what it would be, you know, to go to school at Rice. And but we came, as I said, we had limited opportunities, and my parents were just interested in making sure they graduated from high school. And so when I graduated from high school, I joined the Air Force, and I got stationed at Fort Yukon Air Station in Alaska. And there I met 2 Air Force Academy graduates, and they persuaded me that I ought to try to go back to college. And so worked very hard at getting an appointment to the Academy, and I did get the appointment to the 1979 class, which was the last all-male class at our service academies, and went to school there. But I quickly discovered that I liked my government and political science courses more than my physics and chemical engineering courses, and thought maybe I should pursue a career in law. And I really debated about what I should do, whether I should stay at the academy or not, and ultimately decided that I would sort of put it in God's hands by applying to the school I dreamed about going to as a boy. And if I had accepted at Rice, I thought, well, then I was meant to be that I would be a lawyer. If not, I would stay at the academy, hopefully become a fighter pilot. And Rice took me, and I entered in 1977, so I was able to complete the dream I had as a small boy.
I'm sure that made your parents very proud.
I think so. I hope so.
As a Latino growing up, did you experience any challenges? And if so, what kind of challenges?
You know, I'm often asked whether or not did I experience any kind of discrimination. Again, I grew up in a pretty poor neighborhood. We had African American people there, we had white people there, and we were all just relatively poor, so we all treated each other the same way. I don't know I don't consciously remember feeling discrimination. I do believe that I probably have been helped, and I probably have been hurt by my race. I don't dwell on that, whether or not I've encountered discrimination, and I try to tell young people in particular that they shouldn't dwell on it as well. I mean, I think that's counterproductive. I think people ought to really focus on the opportunities that they're given and not really so much why those opportunities are given to them.
You know, the students that will be watching this will probably look at you as a role model. You've done a lot, you've accomplished a lot. In your life, what have been your role models?
Well, certainly my parents. My father probably worked harder than any person I've ever known. He would often get up before dawn and come home after dark, and he worked extremely hard, and he would come home exhausted and just go straight to bed. But one thing that I learned from him was the importance of responsibility. I mean, we never took a handout. He felt he was responsible for the family, and so we made sure that we looked out after each other, and so that was a lesson I learned from him. I also would have to say that the president has been a role model for him. For me, I've seen him in a lot of different roles, as a parent, as a head of a political party, as a head of state, and now the head of a nation. And I really have learned a lot in watching how he deals with people. And so I would say that he's also been a tremendous role model for me.
Are there any role models in the Hispanic community that you think stand out in your mind that are good role models for young people?
Well, certainly in Houston, I got involved in many community activities. And there were a lot of local community leaders in Houston, Gasper Meir, Dorothy Garam, local leaders, very active in the community, concerned about making sure that younger Hispanics had an opportunity. And they sort of took me under their wings and got me involved in community activities. And I really am grateful for the care and attention that they gave someone like me.
Now, you served in the Air Force from 1973 to 75. Would you recommend military service for young Hispanic Americans, and why?
I'd recommend it for some people. I mean, for me, it was, I can't imagine where I would be today if I hadn't gone to the Air Force, because it taught me a trade. I was able to earn GI benefits. In fact, I received GI benefits up until the last month of law school. So it really worked out perfectly for me, and it provided me an opportunity to get an education that I might not otherwise have had. For some Hispanics, I'm sure it's really not necessary to get, in order to get an education, and the military may not be good for them. For me, it taught me discipline, and allowed me to see other parts of the country, and so it was a very good decision for me.
In 1988, the first Bush administration, the staff, asked you to join them. Tell me a little bit about that, because that was kind of interesting, and it's played a role in your history.
In '88, there was an effort by the first Bush administration to try to identify Hispanics and African Americans and Asian Americans to come work in the administration. They were interested in more diversity. And then President Bush had friends in my law firm, Vincent Elkins, and so I was asked to come up to Washington and interview for some positions, which I did, and was offered some positions, I think, in HUD and maybe in the Veterans Administration. I was a relatively young lawyer, and these were relatively junior positions, and quite frankly, I was more interested in staying at my firm. The firm had never had a minority partner, and I wanted to make partner. It was important for me to do that, and I felt that by becoming a partner at a major firm, it would provide a foundation for me to do a lot of other things in my career. And so I made a decision to not take the offers and to stay at my firm and see if I could make partner.
Now, you mentioned earlier, growing up, your parents emphasized speaking and learning English, but with the influx of so many immigrants coming in from other Spanish-speaking countries, opinions on bilingual education, how do you see that developing in the country?
I, not surprisingly, agree with the President on this issue. I think what he would say, and I agree with, is that bilingual education should be supported if it's effective. If it's working in a community, then we should support it. If it's not working and Hispanic kids are not learning, particularly not learning English, then I think we need to look at other ways to educate our children.
The presidency is a division all amongst itself. What's changed in your relationship with the president from governor to president on the personal level?
What has changed? We probably have less time together. When he was governor, it would not be unusual for me to just pop in at the governor's office.
Hey, George, no, ready for lunch?
Never George. Never have called him George, and never would. And just chat, you know, come by at the end of the day in particular and just chat and see how things were going. Now we are all much more considerate of his time. He's got so many demands that I try to limit the amount of time. I don't want to waste his time. And obviously it's always nice to go in there and in the Oval Office and just sit around and talk about things in Texas, which we still do from time to time. But it's different. We're much more considerate. He's very, very disciplined, and so meetings begin and start on time. And he's a disciple of his schedule. Make sure he sticks to his schedule. So we're all very considerate of that. But when we have those quiet moments and we're able to speak just one-on-one, it's still the same. And so that makes it very gratifying.
You and your wife have 3 children. Have your children's future plans changed now that you're the counsel to the President of the United States?
They complain a lot about the fact. They always say, "Daddy, do you have to go to the White House today?"
Not again, the White House.
I don't know I'm not sure they had any future plans before I came to Washington, and I'm not sure what those plans would be now. I will tell you that as a parent, and I'm sure all parents worry about this, I sometimes am concerned that they will not remember this time. If I go off and go back into private practice, will they remember my time as Secretary of State or a State Supreme Court Justice or the time here at the White House? I think they're getting old enough where they will remember this experience, but I think it's very important for them to see that. I mean, it makes me very proud to be able to bring them up to the White House and see what I do.
You know, it seems the administration of 1988 and this current administration has some similarity in terms of diversity. They seem to put diversity at the forefront, and they think it's good for the country. Would you agree with that?
Oh, no, there's no question about that, and I think that stems from the attitude of certainly this president who is from Texas and realize the importance of diversity in Texas, and so he understands how important it is for the country as a whole. I think he believes that our government should be representative of our society. And that's even true in the judiciary. And some people might say, well, you know, shouldn't you be looking only at quality? But quality comes in all colors. And I think this president believes that we have a special obligation in choosing from a diverse society to make sure that we go to segments of society which traditionally maybe have been ignored in the past. And so we've been charged by him to work extra hard to make sure that we have diverse government.
I think the president is showing that with leadership, communities can actually do a lot more for themselves in developing, as you said earlier, their own role models, having their own communities, really take by the bootstraps and increase their own abilities to improve. Your ideas about that? What can communities do in the Hispanic communities to improve?
Well, I do think that we have great opportunities because of the increased numbers in our community. But you know, increased numbers in and of itself is not sufficient. It's not. I don't draw great comfort simply because of the fact that we have more numbers. I mean, we have to take advantage of that. I often say that we will not be able to blame other people if our children continue to be illiterate and don't receive a good education, or if politicians ignore issues and interests of the Hispanic community, because we have the opportunity, you know, on election day to make changes, and if we don't take advantage of that, then we have no one to blame but ourselves. So while we have clearly more opportunities these days, I think it also means that we have greater responsibility, and it's important for all of us to make sure that the Hispanic community understands that they have that special responsibility. Otherwise, the problems that confront our community will continue to exist.
And you speak about numbers, and Mexico has 100 million. So, I mean, we see with this administration changes in the relationship to help Mexico improve itself with their large numbers?
Well, I think clearly a strong Mexico, a strong middle class in Mexico is good for Texas, and it's good for the United States, and I think the president understands that, and he's working very closely with President Fox.
Advice you'd like to share with young Hispanic Americans?
I would say be prepared for any opportunity. And by that I mean get a good education, learn a profession or trade, because you never know when the next George W. Bush is going to come along and give you a shot, which is what happened to me. But I wouldn't have been given a shot but for the fact that I had a good education, I had a good training at Vincent Elkins, and so you've got to be prepared.
That's great advice. Judge Gonzalez, we certainly appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you very much.